Good evening, everybody. Can I welcome you all to this meeting of the Woking Borough Council Planning Committee for Wednesday, June the 9th, 2021. This is a hybrid meeting because some people are present with me in the chamber and others are participating remotely by using Microsoft Teams. The meeting is also being live streamed on YouTube. I'm Councillor Chris Bowring and I chair the meeting. The Planning Committee, most of whom are in the chamber, consists of 11 elected members, borough councillors, and are supported by a variety of officers. There are representatives on the committee from all four political groups on the council. Those officers physically present tonight are Justin Turvey, who is the operational manager for development management, and on my left, Callum Wernham, who's Democratic and the Electoral Services Specialist and clerk to the committee, also Anne Hunter in front of me, also from Democratic Services. Other officers will appear remotely, and they are Judy Kelly, who's the Highways Development Manager, and Mary Severin, the Borough Solicitor. And we have the case officers who present each application. They are also off remote. This is a quasi-judicial meeting with formal procedures which must be adhered to. For each application, firstly, the planning officer will present the application. Then only those speakers who have pre-registered to speak will be called to address the committee. No one else, including borough councillors, town and parish councillors, agents, applicants, objectors, supporters, are permitted to address the committee, ask questions, interrupt or disrupt the meeting. But everyone has had a chance to comment on the application through the normal consultation process. Please note that there is a strict time limit for speakers of 3 minutes for each of the four categories, which are town and parish councils, objectors, supporters, and borough councillors affected by the application. Members of the committee are more impressed by the quality of what you say rather than how long you speak for. But above all, please stay within your time limit. Following the registered speakers, members of the committee will discuss and debate the application and seek clarification from the council's professional planning officers in order to try to reach a decision. The decision reached by the committee may or may not agree with that recommended by the presenting case officer. Finally, it is the committee's responsibility to determine any valid planning application placed before it using current national and local planning policies and relevant decisions of the Independent Planning Inspectorate. This is the first meeting of the municipal year with a new planning committee, and I'd like to begin by echoing the remarks that Stephen made at the last meeting to Simon Wicks, who was the previous chairman, and just say I appreciate Simon's hard work and his extreme fairness in all he did as chairman. He was an excellent chairman, and all I can do is try to emulate him as best I can. I'd also like to thank Abdul Loys and Malcolm Richards, who were on the committee, for their work, and to welcome back Councillor Bill Soane, who was on the committee some time ago. I presume he had time off for good behaviour, I guess. Brand new members, Sam Akhtar and Rebecca Margetts, who are also new members of the council. And I'd also like to thank Angus Ross, who's my vice chairman. He will be an invaluable help to me from his vast experience on this committee. I just wish he was sitting a bit closer to me, but let's hope that can be arranged in the near future. On a technical point, Councillor Gary Cowan is joining us remotely, and this means he won't be able to vote and he won't be able to make any proposals, but he will be able to take full part in the discussions that the committee has. So moving on to the agenda. Callum, do we have any apologies for absence?
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. We have 3 lots of minutes. We have to consider all 3? Yep, 3 lots of minutes. 10th of March 2021, extraordinary meeting on the 24th of March and the 18th of May, also 2021. Are there any comments on those minutes, please? Don't see anyone. Do you wish me to sign those now?
Yeah, you just show of hands for all three.
Oh yes, those in favour, please, for all three. Thank you. I think that's unanimous. Thank you. And moving on, item number 3 is declarations of interest. Any member have a declaration of interest? No? Angus?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I don't believe I need to declare an interest, but I'd just like to note that on item 5, I have, over the last year or so, been working as a liaison between the Borough Council and the Friends of Fox Hill, but I've not dealt with this application in any way. I've not had any contact with the applicant, and I have not formed any opinion about this application to date.
Okay, thank you. And Andrew Mickleborough?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I declare a prejudicial interest in agenda item 9, application 210448, 57 Chiltern Crescent. I am a member of the Early Town Council Planning Committee, which made a recommendation regarding this application. I have formed a view regarding the application and therefore will not participate in either the discussion or vote on this item.
Thank you, Andrew. That's noted. Moving on, number 4, are there any applications to be deferred or withdrawn?
None, Chair.
Thank you. So moving on to the first application, which is 203539, land off Bearwood Road. And the presenting officer is Stefan Fludger. So over to you, Stefan.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share the presentation one moment. Can everyone see the presentation now?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the wrong view, Stefan.
Wrong view.
Yeah, we were seeing your notes.
Oh no, we don't want to see that.
No. And then if you do what you just did, but you need to swap the view at the top, I think.
Right, okay. Sorry about this. 1 second.
No, we're seeing your notes again. Right, hang on. So you just need to swap at the top. You need to click display settings and then switch it, I think.
Right, is that correct? Can everyone see that clearly now?
It's only the half screen is the problem, as in we can only, it's not the full screen. Oh, there we go. That's it. You got it.
There we go. Sorry about that. Some technical issues. So this is application 203539. The proposed development consists of a change of use of existing woodland to informal, recreational and associated structures. It's presented to the committee as it is a major application for approval. It's worth noting at the beginning of this application that it does not relate to the provision of suitable alternative natural green space, or SANG, and it would not be associated with any residential development. It relates to the provision of informal recreational land within an existing area of woodland. This is the site location plan. So you can see the Woos Hill Estate here to the east, and Bearwood Road over here. The access would be from Bearwood Road, which you'll see in a moment. This is an aerial image of the site, which shows the woodland pylon going through the middle, the Woos Hill Estate over here, and then again there's Bearwood Road over here. This is the area that the car park will be in, which you'll see more clearly in a moment when I show you the plan, but there are the neighbouring properties here. The car park would be in roughly this location. So this is the plan of the whole site. The yellow line shows the approximate location of the proposed footpath. This is an existing public right-of-way into the site. This is the existing access off of Dorset Way. This would be where the car park is, and this is the existing access off Highlands Avenue. These are the proposed gates, fencing, seating, and footpath surfacing. And this is the car park area, which shows the 18 parking spaces proposed, including 3 disabled spaces. It is a little bit difficult to show photos of what is an area of woodland, but I'll show you some photos anyway. So this is the entrance off Dorset Way. You have an existing footpath that goes off Dorset Way from here, and then the second photo is at this point here further up. This is the entrance off Limmerhill Road. And then this is the entrance off Highlands Avenue, which is existing. This is a view of through the middle of the site, which is dissected by pylons. There's another image at the middle of the site. There would be substantial rhododendron removal on the site, which is an invasive species. So these are just a couple of images to show you the density of the rhododendron in some areas of the site. And there would be some removal of vegetation within the car park area, which is in this area here. This is the view of the front of the site from Bearwood Road, which is lined with rhododendron. This rhododendron across the front, along the frontage of Bearwood Road would be retained as it contributes to the character of the area. However, it would be managed. So, in conclusion, the proposal is acceptable in principle. There would be minimal changes to the character of the area. There would be sufficient parking and no other highway issues or any other issues. It's accordingly recommended for approval. In terms of updates, there's nothing included within the supplementary planning agenda as this was published yesterday. However, I've been informed that the comments from Wokingham Town Council on page 46 of the agenda are incorrect. These are comments from a previous application at the site. The council's comments relating to the application are included on page 87, and these are correct. These indicate that the Town Council believe that the footpath should be 11 metres from neighbouring house gardens for privacy. They have concerns relating to fire service access. They consider there needs to be a maintenance plan, and they have concerns relating to the noise at A1 Business Park, just to make their comments clear. These have been addressed in the officer report. And thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Stefan. We now have some registered speakers. First of all, we have Tony Deniston, who's a neighbour, and Nicola Greenwood, British Horse Society, Access and Bridleways Officer. She is commenting, and these two speakers are sharing the 3 minutes. So can we begin with Tony Dellis?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. The camera's not working for some reason, but thank you for allowing me time this evening. I'm listed as an objector. However, I wish to make comments only and have been advised by the officer to do it this way. I have 4 points to comment on. Firstly, the footpath of the northern boundary is currently only 0.6 metres wide and will require a lot of vegetation and some trees to be removed for the 2 metre requirement. This will remove the screen shielding neighbouring properties in Kent Close and Riding Way. An alternative path was submitted in my comments with requirements no trees to be removed, and would still meet the 2.3 kilometre requirement in the event of a future SANG. A Wokingham Council officer walked this with me and agreed the path is better as it goes through woodland and does not overlook properties. This alternate path should be made a condition of approval. Secondly, the Plan 6768 PSO2 Revision F is ambiguous refencing. The fencing along the public right-of-way 1 is to be retained. It is currently missing in places and other areas not matching the specific specification proposed, yet the document states the council require upgrading of existing fencing on the northern boundary. This is inconsistent. Of course, this is not a SANG application, so there may not need to be any fencing requirement at all. Thirdly, barbecue should not be permitted as there have been a number of fires on the site requiring fire brigade attendance. This attendance will become more difficult when passed, if it is passed due to the installation of gates. Lastly, the applicants in this case are also the owners of A1 Wokingham Car Spares. This company are a contracted preferred supplier to the council, and therefore there is a clear conflict of interest in any comments made by council officers about this company in the report. In particular, the comments made by the Environmental Health Officer, Renoise, from A1 should be disregarded and an independent report commissioned. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Moving on to Nicola, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Slightly indistinctly, I think.
Yeah, okay. Good evening. The RG40, RG41, RG2 and RG6 postcodes cover the area in and around Barkham and Wokingham parishes. The new figures for the postcodes provided by DEFRA dated April 2021 show an increase of 25% in horse ownership, with a new total of 1,548 horses. These horses bring in excess of £8.5 million per annum to the local economy, almost 3 million more than 9 years ago. I attribute this increase in horse ownership to the large number of new houses that have been built in this area of the borough. Foxhill has been enjoyed by horse riders for over 50 years. To retain and increase rural job and business opportunities, off-road horse rider access close to where these people live needs to be retained and increased, not decreased. Should you decide to approve this application today, please make it a condition of approval that access between Bearwood Road and Limmerhill Road is retained for horse rider use, so those keeping their horses in Limmerhill Road are not forced onto Barkham Road to get to the Coombs, and a circular bridleway is placed around the outside of Foxhill for recreational horse rider and cyclist use. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. We now have Emily Ford, the agent, and Tim Lloyd from Friends of Foxhill, and they're sharing their 3 minutes. Can you go ahead, Emily, please?
Good evening, just check you can hear me.
Yep.
Okay. Good evening, Chairman and members. My name is Emily Ford. I am a senior planner at Barton Wilmore and I speak on behalf of the applicants, Mr. and Mrs. Pike. The proposal seeks full planning permission for the change of use of 14.77 hectares of woodland to informal recreational land. The land is currently private woodland and is informally used for recreation by local residents. This proposal seeks to regularise that recreational use through the creation of a new public open space. New Hoggin surfaced footpath routes will be created, providing new recreational routes of 2.3 kilometres, 1.5 kilometres and 1 kilometre in length. The surfaced routes will be usable throughout the year and suitable for users with mobility issues. Wokingham Footpath 1 will also be surfaced as part of the scheme, following a request from officers during consideration of the proposals. The route of the footpath will take account of trees and other protected species on site. Tree removals will be limited, with the footpath following existing routes through the site as far as possible. 5 points of access to the site will be provided, with kissing gates wide enough for visitors with mobility issues. 18 car parking spaces, 3 of which will be disabled spaces, will be provided off Bearwood Road. Car parking will be screened from Bearwood Road by the existing rhododendron. Cycle parking will also be provided. The scheme will provide a biodiversity net gain. The woodland will be managed with invasive species removed. It is considered that this proposal is extremely sustainable and provides significant public benefits, most notably enabling public access to woodland which is currently private. I fully support the officer's recommendation in favour of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Lloyd, please.
Good evening. My name is Tim Lloyd and I'm Chair of Friends of Fox Hill. We are a community group created to support access to and the conservation of this area of much loved woodland. The people of Woos Hill and surrounding areas have been using Fox Hill for recreation for decades, often unaware that most of it is private land. We therefore support the application as the only currently available means to guarantee public access and proper management of the flora and fauna for a positive net benefit. Residents do have remaining concerns, which include the routing of footpaths behind neighbouring properties and through areas prone to flooding, and details of tree preservation and wildlife conservation. To resolve these, we ask the Council to extend the proposed conditions to include meaningful consultation with the local community when detailed plans are being prepared. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stefan, there was some points raised there. Perhaps you comment on those. Oh, I'm so sorry, Sarah. Councillor Sarah Kerr, member for Evandens.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. The site in question is privately owned and has been enjoyed by the local community for decades, and maintaining that public access for my community is paramount. My expectation is that the committee tonight will be minded to approve the application, and I urge you to consider the following conditions or informatives as appropriate. Number 1, footpath route. The concerns raised about the proximity of part of the footpath to residential properties have not been adequately dealt with in the officer's report. WBC officers met with the Friends of Fox Hill group, who proposed an appropriate alternative route, but sadly ignored in this application. As such, I'm requesting that a condition is put in to include consultation with the Friends of Fox Hill group on the detailed design. And number 2, accessibility of site to existing community. Conditions 10, 12 and 13 of the report prohibit use of the site until certain infrastructure is in relating to the car park. The car park construction is purely there for new users. Why should the community who uses this woodland now be prohibited from using the site whilst waiting for construction of a facility they will not be using? Please can these conditions be updated accordingly to take this into account? And in line with the inclusive community section of the core plan, please can a condition be added that deals with the public right-of-way officer's request for a larger version of the kissing gates for motorised wheelchair users. Number 3, fencing. Given that this is not an application for a SANG, there is no need to put fencing in along the northern boundary of the site. And arguments that this creates detrimental damage to the woodland of the private access is unfounded, given that these entrances exist already and have been used for decades, and there have not been cases of dogs escaping. I'm requesting a condition that removes the need for fencing on the northern boundary where residential fencing is already in situ, please. Sustainability. Regarding access from Sindlesham, it is completely irrelevant that there is a footpath to Barkham because it's a different community in the opposite direction. Please can a condition be added to this that mandates suitable and safe walking and cycling infrastructure along Bearwood Road from Sindlesham, or this proposal cannot be classed as sustainable. Barbecues, we already have an issue with fires in the woodland and damage to vegetation, with the fire service being called on numerous occasions due to irresponsible behaviour. I implore you to put a condition in that bans barbecues. Noise, there have been long-standing issues with noise from the nearby scrapyard. Mitigation measures will not affect the use of land as open spaces. Mitigation measures need to take place on the scrapyard site itself. And given that the scrapyard owners are the applicants, can a condition please be put in that tackles the noise pollution issue, please? And finally, cyclists. The applicant's desire to not have cyclists in the area is at odds with the Greenway Route B. There is no reason why cyclists should be prohibited, as with other spaces of this nature. I asked the committee to put in a condition to allow cycling. I would also like appropriate wording with regards to secure bike storage. Currently, this is set to be solely in the car park, which is not accessible safely by a segregated cycle lane. Most cyclists will access the other various points, particularly from the Greenway, and if they choose to walk once there, bicycle storage needs to be put in at these other entrances as well. So something in the conditions for that, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Apologies again for momentarily forgetting you. Right. Yeah, Stefan, as I was saying.
Yeah.
Sorry, if you picked the question I asked.
That's all right. I will go through these as best I can. There were quite a few points. So in terms of the footpath along the northern boundary, we have assessed this as officers, and largely the footpath along the northern boundary, especially in relation to Kent Close, will be very close to the existing footpath. It may be closer to the fences, however, there isn't much of a levels difference in this area, especially adjacent to Kent Close, so it's not considered that there would be overlooking issues there. I understand that the issues are in terms of overlooking into neighbours' gardens. The biggest level change is actually in relation to the road to the west of Kent Close, which is Ruskin Way. It's not considered that the scheme would lead to overlooking to neighbours. The path would be at closest to neighbours would be 12 metres. Once the final location of the footpath has been set, there will be removal of rhododendron from the site, which will open up the site somewhat, but there is still quite a lot of vegetative screening along the edge of the site, and it's just not considered that the footpath is close enough to lead to significant overlooking in this location. In terms of the fencing around the site, there would be a post and rail fence, as far as I understand it, around the majority of the site, apart from where the adjacent WBC land adjoins the open space. So there would be no fence between there, but it's not considered harmful. It's a post and rail fence, and it's not considered harmful. I can't see on the plan where there is ambiguity in relation to the fencing. The barbecue issue has been raised a number of times. There's been no objection from Berkshire Fire and Rescue, who have been consulted on the application, and the situation would be similar to the existing situation, so it hasn't been considered necessary to apply a condition. It is a long-running issue that there are complaints regarding noise from the adjacent A1 scrapyard, and I know that there are other issues going on surrounding that, but it's not considered that would prevent the use of this area as open space, and the environmental health officer hasn't objected. In terms of horses, we have acknowledged as officers that horses currently use the site, especially going through between Bearwood Road and Limmer Hill. The applicant has proposed to install kissing gates, which would effectively prevent horses from passing through the site. Policy CC03 does require the consideration of cycling, so I can cover cycling as well, cycling and horses. Under planning applications. However, it's important to note that this application does provide a benefit in terms of creating accessibility for the site from disabled persons or people with potential mobility issues through the provision of hard surfacing and the surfacing of the existing public right-of-way, which will be an added benefit. So while the ability to cycle through the site or ride through the site would be lost, and while that is taken into consideration and acknowledged, the scheme does present an overall benefit in terms of access, so it's not considered sufficient to warrant refusal of the application. In terms of meaningful consultation on, there are a number of issues that will be resolved by condition. So that will include things like tree surveys, the final routing of the footpath, because which needs to be informed by additional tree surveys and ecology surveys. I'm just wondering, Justin, is there any way that do you think that that is necessary to or to require additional? Can we require additional consultation on the discharge of the conditions?
The chairman, if he was minded, could request that some conditions came by him and perhaps another nominated member, but that's for members to consider.
Okay. And in terms of Councillor Kerr, Councillor Kerr's comments, I've discussed the proximity of the footpath already. In terms of the kissing gates, again, the kissing gates proposed do meet the British standard and would allow the majority of people to pass through them. That is the gate that the applicant has chosen, and the Public Rights of Way officer has made comment that they could provide the extra large kissing gates, so the size up. However, on balance, we've considered that everyone would be able to pass through the gates apart from the largest motorised mobility scooters, and as they are in accordance with the British standard, we haven't considered that's sufficient to warrant refusal of the application. In terms of the fencing along the northern boundary, this issue has been raised by neighbours and it's been raised before. There are neighbours along the northern boundary who have accesses from gardens directly into the open space. These have built up over time, and this is an area of private land. In planning terms, the neighbours don't have any right to access the land per se. This has just occurred over time. So as we don't consider the fencing harmful to the character of the area or to neighbouring amenity, there would not be any reason to refuse the application on this basis of the loss of access from the north into the northern part of the site directly from neighbours' gardens. There is no footpath to Sindlesham. However, this does mirror the existing situation. There is a footpath from along the opposite direction along Bearwood Road. Given the scope of the application and the fact that the highway is outside of the application site, it's not considered, it wouldn't warrant refusal of the application that there's no access from Sindlesham. There is good access to the site from most other directions, and especially from the Woos Hill direction. I've commented already on barbecues. I've already commented on noise, and this application can't be used to mitigate the noise against that already occurs at A1. I have already commented on cycling, and in terms of bike storage in other areas, no other officers, so the Public Rights of Way officer, Green Infrastructure officer, or the Highways officer have considered that necessary or objected to the provision of a cycle stand in the car park area only, given the fact that people would need to get off their bike and go into the space through the kissing gate on foot, then that's not considered detrimental. And I think I've covered all the comments there.
I would just say, Stefan, that with these comments, some of them are requests for conditions to be added, but some of them seem to me to be proposing changes to the application. I think to allow horses in would require the gates to be changed, and that would be a change to the application, whereas request to ban barbecues could be put in as a condition, and I think we need to distinguish between the two.
Yes, true. So I think you could, in terms of utilising conditions, I think you could condition additional bike storage to be provided. I think you could potentially condition a revised version of the kissing gates into the site if that was your if you wish to do that, if members wish to do that, we could amend the approved details condition and add an additional condition requiring revised gate details. I don't think that would be a problem. We couldn't use conditions to mitigate noise.
So it's slightly confused about. I would have thought that changing the gates was changing the application. Are you saying it could be considered minor enough?
I think it's quite minor. Justin, do you have a view on that, or?
I think it's minor enough that members could do it if they wanted to. I think what really the starting point is to consider whether or not the changes would be necessary, and whether or not they meet all the tests of planning conditions. So you hear that you've got a gate that meets the British standard, but you've got a request for something that goes well beyond that. So really you have to consider whether or not in planning terms it would be necessary for you to have a gate that's wider than the British standard.
Thanks, Justin. Okay, members who would like to see Carl. I'm going to start. I'm going to call people at random rather than who was first up. So is Gary up? Rochelle.
Okay, several questions. Will the gates be openable enough so the Royal Berks Fire and Rescue Service can actually get in there in case of fire? Because they've said there were problems with fires and barbecues already, and the gates should have some access for emergency vehicles of all types. Will the access from Simons Lane be permitted? Because right now, getting into Fox Hill, you can get in off of Simons Lane, which is for Embrook and Winnish residents to use that area. Will there be any electrical car charging spaces and ability in case for the future? So when we do have more electrical cars, that we can possibly do that. And I think lastly, one more question. Is this being made as a nice place so they can have housing later on? In the past, we have seen a lot of these type things, suitable alternative natural green spaces to be used as stalking horse for houses. I'm just curious, that's all. It's just something that it's come up in my mind before. And we're removing some amenity from the space by removing horses. Since horses have survived very well and had no problems with pedestrians in the past, I don't see why we should not allow them in the future. That's all for right now.
Okay, thank you, Rochelle. Stefan, could you answer those 5 points, I think?
Yeah, sorry. So there is a gate for large enough for vehicles to enter the site off the car park. Simons Lane isn't connected to this area of Fox Hill. It's slightly to the north, so there isn't an access off Simons Lane, and there isn't at the present time. There is no provision at the moment for electric charging, and that hasn't been recommended by the highways officer. And in terms of housing, again, this isn't an application for SANG, and it isn't related to any housing applications or any applications for housing, so I can't comment on that. And in terms of horses, I think I've adequately covered that already. But if you'd like me to cover it again, then I can do.
Rochelle?
That would be useful. And who will maintain this area as well?
So in terms of maintenance, at the moment, it will be the applicant. If they were to choose to change that in the future, then that could potentially change, but there's nothing to say that it wouldn't be the applicant at the moment. And in terms of horses, again, we have the access for horses would be lost from the site, but there are significant benefits in terms of accessibility for disabled persons and provision of the footpath. And because of that, the footpath is relatively narrow, and we consider that there would potentially be a conflict with horses and cycles. So yeah, I think that covers it.
Do you want to come back in, Rochelle? Shall I move on to Carl, I think is. Carl?
Thank you, Chair.
Andrew.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Right, the first one, what's changed about the car park from the previous application? And the reason I ask this is that the original application, one of the reasons for refusal was that it would result in harm to the character of Bearwood Road through the harmful positioning of the proposed car park. And yet on page 57 of this agenda, paragraph 17, it says the car park is proposed to be in the same location as under the previous application. And then later on in that quite long paragraph, it says it is now considered that the location of the car park is acceptable. So I'm a bit where we jump from a reason of refusal to, yes, it's in the same place, but no, it's not acceptable. So if you could explain why that's changed. My next question will be about the access on Bearwood Road. I would have really liked them to extend that 40-mile-an-hour zone up from where it stops at St Catherine's Lodge. I use that road a lot. I've cycled on it a lot, although not to here, obviously, because there's nowhere to go with your bike. And I've also run on it as well, even the bits that haven't got pavements, and it's pretty suicidal most of the time. And you know, cars are, the limit's 50 there, but you know they do go faster. It's countryside. And that kind of, as we saw from the photo, the access is going to be right on the out of a bend. So that does worry me a bit. So why has that not been changed in some way? My third question is, I was going to ask which bits of the site are ancient woodland, but I noticed in the pack we got yesterday that there's a map with about half this site is ancient woodland. And as the trees are all covered by TPO anyway, and I kind of found the Woodland Trust objection quite convincing. So the question I want to ask is, how will the driving of these 20-metre wide cleared paths be managed and monitored by us so as to fit inside the requirements of the NPPF, which from the Woodland Trust objection seems quite solid. And my final question is, not wanting to mention the SANG, not a SANG, but on page 69, paragraph 63, it seems to indicate that the current level of use would have to be discounted from any mitigation capacity of any future SANG based on this site, if it was later used as SANG. So what, just so I'm clear, does that mean that this site is not that much use as a SANG, considering it's already quite heavily used?
You just step in, Stefan.
Yeah. So in terms of the car park is in the same location, but there's a significantly greater level of information available with this application compared to the previous application. So we're now aware of there is now a strategy for removal of vegetation and trees at the point of the car park. Part of the issue with the refusal of the previous application related to the lack of screening along Bearwood Road, which would now be secured in terms of the rhododendron, which would be managed. So that's why the car park location is now considered acceptable as part of the scheme as a whole, which has changed, and there's a significantly greater level of information available. In terms of access from Bearwood Road, the highways officer hasn't objected in terms of the speed. I know this has been raised by neighbour objections as well, but they haven't objected. So there isn't a reason for refusal as far as we can see as officers. In terms of the impact on ancient woodland, you're correct, about half the site is ancient woodland. There is a conflict between the advice that we've received and the comments we've received. So, for example, Natural England, who actually hold the ancient woodland inventory, haven't objected to this scheme, but the Woodland Trust have. Their concerns largely relate to the impact of increased footfall within the site, which has potential to impact soil conditions, ground conditions, etc. However, our own officers, so the tree officer and the ecologist, believe that the surfacing of the footpaths will actually mitigate this issue. While there'll be an increase in the number of people going to the site, which we can't quantify, the surfacing of the footpaths will encourage people, which is an improvement on the current situation, to stay to the footpaths which are surfaced, which would actually prevent people from, well, encourage people from crossing the woodland itself, and prevent the soil, protect the soil from damage where people are walking. And then in terms of the SAN capacity, again, this isn't a material consideration. However, as far as the SAN process is slightly different, but as far as I understand it, if the site was to be considered SAN at the point that it is assessed as being suitable, the level of footfall within the site is a consideration, because obviously the land has to have a capacity in terms of the number of people that can come to the site, and anyone that's already going there eats into that capacity. That's my understanding. But again, that's not what's in front of us. Yeah, and I think I've covered everything.
Okay, do you want to come back, Carl?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for that, Stefan. That was really comprehensive.
Yeah.
Just a quick comment, really. When I first saw this and it mentioned SAN and then said, oh, no, it's not a SAN. I mean, I kind of thought, well, there's housing going somewhere and someone knows what this site's going to be used for. You know, it's nothing to do with this application. But I do note that if you look I mean, SANs are usually relatively close to where the housing is going to be. And if you look, Barkham Parish Council have objected on about 1 million points. So I think we know where they think the housing's going. Thanks.
Can I just check on a couple of things there? You're saying, Stefan, the car park is in the same position as for the previous application, but the way it's to be constructed is more acceptable. It's indicating how rhododendrons are going to be removed without damaging trees. Is that right?
No, so there will be trees removed where the car park is, because obviously they need to provide hard surfacing. So there will be a number of trees removed. However, what we have with this application is we have a strategy which is ensured by condition that in the majority of the site, the rhododendron will be removed, which will then allow tree surveys to be submitted. In the car park area, the trees that are there will be removed, but the strip of rhododendron along the front will be retained. At the point of the previous application, we had a lot less information, also regarding the retention of the rhododendron along the front. So we're now satisfied that the removal of those trees at the front of the site as part of the application as a whole, and with all the information that we have, won't result in significant harm.
And the defence of the Woodland Trust comments was by saying that the number of trees to be removed was very small, I think. Was that right?
Yeah, so the number of trees will be small. We can't quantify that at this point, because the trees to be removed will be informed after the removal of the rhododendron. But the whole point in removing the rhododendron first is so that the footpath can then be routed with minimal impact on trees.
Thank you. Andrew, I think.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Stefan, for your presentation. I'd like to, I believe that this application has many elements of considerable merit, but I would like to ask probably 4 questions. The first is that whilst I appreciate the application is not for a SAN, but I believe this is the medium to long-term goal. Do the proposals depend in any way on eventual designation as a SAN? Are there any risks that if planning permission was granted now, and is saying did not eventuate or does not eventuate, that we could be left with a partially completed project and one that was not well maintained. The second area of questioning has already been briefly touched upon. I think, Stefan, you said that you're unable to quantify the likely increased use of the site, should this application be approved. And I understand why that would be very difficult. But nonetheless, I'm just curious as to whether there's been any modelling done to try to forecast potential increase in usage. And if there were to be significant increased usage, the probable impacts that this could have on issues such as noise and litter and so forth, that could, and also those that could impact on the amenity of neighbouring properties, and whether these forecasts, in a sense, may have been explicitly considered when officers were making their recommendation. There's been a number of references to the car park, mostly about the positioning of the car park. Are you able to provide any information about how the number of parking spaces was determined? Is there a parking standard for this type of land use? And the reason for asking this is that I'm concerned, as to whether or not there might be any adverse impacts should the number of parking spaces prove to be insufficient, because the positioning on Bearwood Road, a busy Bearwood Road, where I imagine on-road parking would not be possible, could create potentially, I imagine, some real challenges. And my final area of questioning is about the hogging footpaths in particular, which the third speaker tonight said would be maintained to a standard that would make them accessible throughout the year. Now, as someone involved in maintaining similar footpaths in the Maiden Early Nature Reserve, I know the time and the expense involved in doing this, including to ensure that they remain safe and accessible for all users, including disabled users, throughout the year. Can the officers confirm that there are adequate conditions or safeguards to ensure that those paths will actually be maintained, can be maintained, to a sufficiently high standard, to enable access for all throughout the year? Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Stefan?
Yes, so in terms of so in terms of could the scheme be left as an unfinished project, that is a possibility, as with any planning application. It's a private site. The applicant has applied for to place these paths. The development really, the physical development really only consists of the paths and the car park. But yes, there is a theoretical possibility that it could not be finished. Equally, the applicant could close the site at any point, because this is it's a private project. In terms of the increase in use of the site, no, there hasn't been any modelling submitted, so that hasn't been assessed. But in terms of noise, the Environmental Health Officer hasn't objected, and I think it is worth bearing in mind that the site, while there is likely to be an increase in the number of people going to the site is used as a piece of open space at the moment, and the majority of the footpaths are going to be in similar locations to the existing footpaths. While it's been a private site, it is fairly well accessed, so there is a level of access to the site anyway. In terms of the number of parking spaces, the highways officer has considered 18 spaces to be acceptable, so there's not really a lot more that I can say about that. They have considered that acceptable, so yes, I acknowledge that there's nowhere to park on Bearwood Road, that is the likely case. In terms of maintenance, again, it is a private project and could be closed at any point. So no, a condition or that there isn't a specific maintenance plan that has been submitted that goes to the specific maintenance of things like footpaths and the car park surfacing, etc. But there will be a long-term maintenance plan in terms of impact on biodiversity and creating a biodiversity net gain.
Thank you. Andrew, do you want to come back?
Yeah, just one very quick point. Is it possible to condition a maintenance plan?
Justin, is that something that you have a view on?
Yeah, yes, I think a maintenance plan would be a reasonable condition.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, Pauline.
Thank you, Chairman. My major concerns are around the loss of access by horses and bicycles to a bit of land that they seem to have used for quite a long time. But I recognise what Stefan's just said, which is that the owner could close it at any time and restrict access completely, which I think is what I heard. So I understand it's not a right, but a sort of something that's happening at the moment. If we, under 53 and the comments about Greenway Route B, or on conversion of this to a real SANG, would we be able to then condition that horses and bicycles could have access to it, having previously approved this, which says they can't?
Again, the issue of the SANG is separate from this application. I don't know if we could require that at the point if the site was to become a SANG, but again, that's a separate issue. You have raised the Greenway route. I understand that the council has, should the council want to place the Greenway route through this site, this application isn't prejudicial to that. From my discussion with the officers, that's delivered through a separate scheme, and there are separate powers to deliver that.
So would it be possible to get some legal advice about any future SANG application to make sure we're not presupposing that if we approve this, that then we can't say, actually, for a SANG application, we want horse and bicycle access?
I'm not sure that it's within the scope of this application, because we have to assess the application that's in front of us, and this isn't an application for SANG.
But what I'm worried about is anything we agree now might prejudice what we're able to agree in future.
Yeah, I think it'll be subject to a new application. But, I don't know if Mary could comment. Mary Severin.
Good evening, everybody. As Stefan has said, I can't. Sorry, Steph. Do you think that I can't see how it would prejudice a future application?
So the way that if the site was to be used for SANG, at the point of an application for housing, they would have to evidence that this site is suitable to be used as SANG, and that assessment would happen at that point. I know that there are whether or not SANG allows horses or not is another point. And that's for the assessment at that time. But I just don't think that it's. I think that it's making an assessment on something that's not in front of us.
Yeah, I understand that. What I'm worried about is accepting this application with its restriction on bicycles and horses, two separate issues, will then stop us in future saying if this converts to a SANG, we wish it to have access to either bicycles or horses or both, or not.
I think it's a separate application, Pauline.
No, it's a separate
what's required for a SANG, the new application would have to comply with, which might mean changing changing the way this this area functions.
So you're saying a future application could change the access?
Well, future application for a SANG could require any amount of changes. Is that correct, Justin?
Yeah, it's not necessarily relevant to what you're considering, but let's say theoretically it were to become a SANG, then potentially there is an issue of conflict between the users of the SANG, particularly dog walkers and cyclists, and particularly horse riders. So I think were an application to come forward, it would have to be considered at the time, but we're not considering that application at the moment.
I realise that, Justin, that wasn't the question. The question is, if we're prohibiting bicycles and horses now, does that stop us allowing bicycles and horses in any future SANG application?
Sorry,
it
yeah,
would
sorry.
require an application to do as much.
I think the short answer is no.
Thank you, Mary. That's all I was after.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary. And Justin. Stephen.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Like many members who've spoken already, I have some concerns about whether what we're seeing is actually what we will eventually get. And I must confess, when I first saw this application, I was highly puzzled by why a landowner should choose out of the kindness of their heart, having allowed public access already, to allow it in a more formalised way and go to the expense of creating paths. But that's not really something we can, I'm afraid, second guess here. We just have to, as Stefan had said, assess the application before us. On the issue of access for horses, and a related point, which is access for neighbours who have customarily enjoyed access to this site from their own gardens. I understand from what Stefan said, in planning law, it's perfectly proper for the landowners to deny access. But of course, in common law, it may not be. If those people have been doing it for a long time, they may have a case that they might wish to pursue in a different arena, but they can't do it through the planning system. That would be my understanding of the situation. My next point is really a question that Stefan, I hope, will be able to answer. I just really need some clarification, and this relates to a point that Justin made earlier. Just for the sake of complete clarity, will the British standard width for the kissing gates allow access to wheelchair users? That's my question. And then I finally would want to, well, penultimately, I'm afraid, support Andrew's idea of a conditioning and maintenance plan. And if he wants to propose that at some point, I'll be happy to second that. And I also wondered whether he might pick up Justin's tentative suggestion that if we wanted to involve members in the final routing of the arrangements for the routing of the path, we could do that through a condition requiring the chair and I think he said another member to sign off on that. Could I suggest that we might pursue that idea and that the other member would be a local member, not necessarily on this planning committee, it wouldn't be on this planning committee, so that we could actually informally secure some of that consultation through that local member with the Friends of Foxhill. So that's two suggestions for additional conditions and a question to Stefan on British standards and wheelchair access.
Yes, so the gates at their current width would allow access for wheelchair users, apart from motorised wheelchair users, of the largest type.
Okay, so it would allow them in most cases, but not all.
Yes, yeah.
So is it possible for us, that would suggest it might be worth conditioning to allow motorised wheelchair users, that extra width required? I don't know what that would be.
I don't know the figures off the top of my head, but yes, as we've discussed, if members see it necessary to add a condition to require the resubmission of the Kissing Gate details, then that is something that we could do.
I think I'd probably like to add that to the list of additional conditions then.
Thank you, Stephen. Stephen, was there a problem with the final routing? Because we don't know where the paths go yet, but until we get the rhododendrons, would that be a problem bringing it back to? Well, I mean, could it be brought back to the committee as a whole?
We would normally seek that with the chair, but Justin, I don't know. Could we bring that back to the committee? Is that a possibility?
If members decided they wanted to do that, then it's within the right to do. I mean, normally it would be through the chair, and the chair is at liberty to consult with other members. But it's a decision for the committee.
Okay, so it wouldn't necessarily have to come back to the committee per se.
Normally it wouldn't come back as an application to committee. Normally, we would consult you as chair when the application came in, and you would consult who you saw fit at the time, whether it be other committee members or ward members.
Okay, well, we can consider that
with you as the lead.
I'm sorry.
So I just said with you as the lead, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Angus.
Thank you, Chairman. It's an area I know well, and I welcome the principle of regularising this area as informal recreation land. And I think we've probably delved into every tree and rhododendron so far tonight, but just a couple of points. I just challenge the planning officer saying that the RBFRS had no objection. It was commented they had no comment. But could I just have confirmation that there is access, I think you referred to, through the car park, that the fire plants could get access there? I just want that confirmed. I was going to make the same point that Stephen Conway made about probably some of the people in Kent Close and Tiffany Close have been getting into that area for probably over 20 years, which they could claim. And I think we just got to recognise that, and whether that should be a reason to not put that fencing up. But I don't want to waver on making progress tonight. However, I would want to propose an informative, and that informative would be that the Borough Council continue search for a verge available to pedestrians to Sindlesham from the car park. I think it is a very obvious line of access. It is not nice now. People try to walk it to a bit further along where there are footpaths through the gypsy site. So I think it would serve a lot of purposes, but I think probably the only way we could incorporate anything tonight is as an informative, and I would propose that.
Sorry, that's an informative to the council, isn't it? Or is this is application, is it not a council application?
I think it has to be because it's outside the red line.
Okay, would that be in order, Justin?
Yes, you could add an informative onto the decision.
Okay, is there anybody else wants to speak? If not, it's, I think this is a balanced decision. Obviously, the horses and cycling is not a good thing, but there are advantages, and it keeps the area open. And there are benefits to ecology, which I don't think have come out perhaps as strongly as they might do. So is anyone on balance minded to propose a refusal at this stage? Well, there won't be any. Can't I take a refusal? There is no refusal, I don't think, and no one's proposing a refusal. So, yeah, yep, I can take Stephen. Well, proposed by Andrew and seconded by Stephen that there's a condition for a maintenance plan. I think that's right. And can I see a show of hands for that, please? Added condition. Okay, I think that's carried. The final routing of the paths to be determined by the chairman. I propose that I would consult with the committee and local members. Obviously, Sarah Kerr, she had an interest in it. Would anyone second that as a condition to be added?
So, Chair, just to be clear, I don't think we put that in the wording of the condition. I think that would just be an action that we would take back. The wording of the condition wouldn't say agreed by members.
No, but the purpose of the condition is to set up their maintenance plan. Oh, sorry, I'm going to get confused. Is to consider the routing.
Yeah, so we've got that routing plan condition. I think the action is just that it comes back to you, which is what you're deciding on.
And Angus can you do your can you do your informative again?
It was informative that Woking Borough Council continue a search for safe pedestrian access from Sindlesham to the proposed car park.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to second that. Those in favour of that informative? And you're waving to speak, Stephen. Please go ahead.
But I was actually waving to speak because I think you've forgotten one condition, or maybe you hadn't got to it. That was about requiring revised details of the kissing gate so that it can now be suitable for motorised wheelchair use. And could I just say, perhaps we could minute that under the previous condition we were discussing, the one about the final routing of the path, where you would be signing off, your kind offer to involve other members of the committee and the local members, especially Sarah Kerr, if that could appear in the minutes, it'll just remind us that that's something that's going to happen.
Yep, that's fine, Stephen. Sorry, I'm confused. What have I forgotten? Have I forgotten you? Oh, your kissing gate thing. Yep, the kissing gate condition. Detail, what was that?
If I'm right in thinking, Stephen, it was revise the condition regarding kissing gates to allow the use of all motorised wheelchairs, including the largest ones. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, who have a seconder for that? Or I'll second. Okay, that's those in favour? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much.
I don't know whether I should, but I had to go out during part of the presentation by the officer, so I'm actually abstaining, if that could be noted.
Okay, that's fair.
Did we formally vote on the informative, Chairman?
Thought I did. Did I not vote on the informative? Your informative. Yep, I think we did. Have I missed anything out now? If not, I think we can go to the vote. We'll go to the recommendation, which is on page 40 of the agenda. There's nothing in the the supplementary planning agenda. So those in favour of approving this application, would please show. Yes, with the extra conditions. Thank you, Stephen. Okay, any against? I think that's approved. Any abstentions? Oh, one abstention. Can't. Okay, 2 abstentions. Right, moving on to the second application, which is 54 to 58 Reading Road in Wokingham. Graham Vaughan is the case officer. Over to you, Graham.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just share the presentation. So hopefully you can all see that.
Yep.
So the site is located near the junction of Reading Road and Station Approach in Wokingham. It's adjacent to St Paul's Church, the train station car park, Beeches Manor and Wade Day Centre. Currently 3 dwellings with associated parking and amenity space, as well as an area of scrubland occupy the site. The proposal is for the development of a 3-storey, 34-unit retirement living apartment scheme with associated communal facilities, parking and landscaping. Due to the shape of the site, the building has been designed in a T shape with the main body of the building addressing Reading Road and a further element projecting into the site. A separate entrance and exit to Reading Road, as well as some parking spaces, would be provided to the front of the site, and the access road would continue along the southeastern edge of the site to a larger parking area, as well as the communal garden area. In the agenda are photo montages provided by the applicant, which depict the potential impact of the proposal. For clarity, I provided a street view image, and you can see the approximate locations of the dwellings 52, 54, 56, 58 Reading Road, and the church on the right. This is the view from station approach. And I've marked the approximate location of the main features in the street scene. So the station car park deck, the church spire there, and 52 Reading Road there. This is the view from the station car park deck. There will be some visibility of the scheme from the station deck, although that is true of the existing dwellings, which you can see there. This is within the site, looking at the rear of the existing dwellings. This is the area to the rear of the site, and it's effectively overgrown scrubland. You can see the station car park deck in the top left and the church tower in the bottom right there. And for context, this is just in the opposite direction, and you can see the road sign for station approach in the centre of the picture there. In terms of the main issues with the scheme, the principle of development is considered acceptable given the location within a major development location and the fact there is a recognised need for this type of housing. As noted in the officer report, the scheme has been subject to pre-app discussions where the design and impact on the character of the area was highlighted. The building is proposed as a single footprint in order to provide step-free access to all apartments, which does result in a larger scale building. However, there are numerous examples in the area of this type of development. With the use of architectural features, breaking up the built form and different materials, it's considered that the scheme would assimilate into the street scene successfully. There would be a minor negative impact on the setting of the adjacent listed building, the church, but this is considered less than substantial harm. In terms of access, this is to be provided by an in-out arrangement onto Reading Road. Following the submission of a Stage 1 road safety audit and a transport statement, our highways officers are satisfied that this is acceptable. It should be noted that the site is in close proximity to other transport modes and Woking Town Centre. The scheme proposes 32 parking spaces, which is lower than the amount required by the adopted parking standards. However, the applicant has highlighted the parking demand for similar size schemes elsewhere is lower, and therefore, from a highways perspective, the parking provision is acceptable. There's a comprehensive landscaping proposed around the site, which includes protecting existing TPO trees. Some of these trees on the site have died, including one TPO tree, but it's proposed to be replaced. For clarification, 2 trees would be removed and 43 planted, but specific details would be agreed through conditions. With regard to affordable housing, the policy compliant level is 30%, but due to viability reasons, the scheme proposes a contribution equivalent to approximately 19%. Whilst this is a minor negative impact, viability is a material consideration and the report has been independently assessed and is therefore considered acceptable. Acceptable separation distances are achieved in terms of residential amenity, particularly in relation to 52 Reading Road. The provision of internal floor space and external amenity space exceeds the requirements. With regard to other material considerations, including drainage and flooding, environmental health, ecology, sustainable design and construction, employment skill plan, and archaeology, all impacts are considered acceptable subject to the conditions set out in the agenda. In the supplementary planning agenda, there's just some clarification on the condition restricting the age of occupancy of the scheme. Therefore, the recommendation is that the committee authorise the grant of planning permission subject to the completion of a legal agreement and the conditions set out in the officer report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Graham. We just have one speaker, Ian Han, who is the agent, please. Mr. Han.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to address committee this evening, and I'd like to thank officers for their assistance during the application and their positive recommendation. The proposal in front of you this evening is for 34 age-restricted retirement living apartments set around communal facilities to provide comfort and security while supporting people to live independent, healthy, happy lives in their own homes. Such accommodation is much needed nationally and locally. Indeed, national planning policy guidance states that it is critical that local authorities deliver housing for older persons and is the only type of housing to have its delivery described in such urgent terms. Locally, the over 65 population of Woking is forecast to grow by 73% by 2036, which is higher than for the South East region or England as a whole. This necessitates a need for over 2,000 elderly person units, where current supply is less than the county average. This clearly shows that there is a need for such development within the borough. The site is well located with easy links to the rest of the town and beyond. The development itself is of high quality, respecting local context, while the use of materials, existing vegetation and new planting will further integrate the proposals. There have been no objections raised by local residents or the town council. The impact upon the neighbouring listed church is less than substantial and outweighed by the benefits of the scheme, and English Heritage have raised no objections. There have also been no objections from the highways regarding to access and parking. The proposed scheme will deliver a range of benefits alongside the agreed affordable housing and SIL payments, helping to support growth in the local economy and nurturing communities. Retirement housing generates greater local spend than other developments, generating over £500,000 of spending per year, approximately 40% of which is spent in the local high street, and will provide vitality to the regenerated town centre. Each person living in such developments enjoy a reduced risk of trips and falls and recover sooner from illness and injury, making an 80-year-old feel on average 10 years younger. This provides savings to health and social care. Furthermore, the formation of new community combats issues of loneliness and isolation, which many people in older age find debilitating. The development will also see the release of under-occupied family houses. For every retirement property sold, at least 2 moves further down the housing chain are created. A development of 40 apartments results in 80 additional moves, with at least 27 first-time buyer properties being released. Therefore, I would respectfully request that members follow the recommendation of officers in approving the scheme, subject to a Section 106 agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Han. Members, over to you. Who would like to speak? Bill Soane.
Thank you very much, Chairman. My concern is your figures of 34 units having 32 car parking spaces. These apartments are available to anybody over the age of 50, and I would consider that a majority of those people, if they are over the age of 50, would still wish to drive. In fact, there may be 2 occupants in one apartment who both own a car. We have the highest car ownership in the country, I believe. So it could cause a problem. The problem is when these residents have visitors. In the area that this is, Station Road and Reading Road, would be almost impossible to park safely. So it's not allowing any overflow or any consideration for either higher car ownership or for visitors, and it may well cause a problem. Thank you.
Thanks. A question for Judy, perhaps, or Graham?
I'm happy to answer that. So I think that the typical car parking requirement for a site such as this, based on McCarthy and Stone evidence, is a lot lower than the typical parking that would be required if it was just market flats. There is a restriction on the age groups that would use the flats. So it wouldn't be your average market housing. The site is very sustainably located. It's on Reading Road, which is good sort of footways, cycleways, bus stops. It's right out the back of Wokingham Railway Station. There is a precedent of car-free developments haven't been approved. A couple I can think of are Rectory Road and the site south of Carnival Pool Leisure Centre. So I think on balance, with the age restriction, we're quite comfortable with the level of parking. It's 6 spaces below what it would be for market housing, but it's not going to be market housing because of the age restriction. So on balance, we're confident that it should be acceptable. Oh, and there's a travel plan as well that's been conditioned for the site. So that's something that can be reviewed on an ongoing basis.
Presumably the average age you'd expect to be rather more than 55. I don't know what it would be.
That's right, Chairman, yes.
Thanks. Okay, Bill? Okay, move on to Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Graham. Firstly, I would like to echo Councillor Soane's concerns relating to parking. I'm not convinced by the answer that has been given. It has been acknowledged that the parking that is that's in the to be provided in the application does fall below the required number of parking spaces. Are there particular parking standards that will apply to this particular type of accommodation? The application in terms of parking also, and the documents don't seem to consider the fact that residents will have visitors. Sometimes it might be a number of visitors who are travelling by car who will require parking spaces, that there may need to be parking provision for tradespersons who are working on the site, for deliveries, and also the absence of sort of convenient, usable on-street parking options nearby. So I'm really quite concerned about the proposed parking provision. But I want to move on to two other points, one quite lengthy point, I'm afraid, and another one is much shorter. The proposed dwellings are described as retirement living apartments to be occupied by people over the age of 55 years. I think it would be really useful, should future applications like this come before the committee, for us to have some information about the typical age profile of people who are actually living, in accommodation like this, because as has been said, many of the occupants will be very active, and potentially quite a significant number could be in employment. Can officers explain, if the building had been designated as flats with no age limit, is it likely that the applicants would have had to provide the affordable accommodation component on site? And also whether the full SIL payments would have been expected. So the question is, designating this as retirement living accommodation rather than flats, does that, what are the implications of that for affordable housing and also for SIL payments? And then my final question, I hope it's a fairly straightforward one, referring to the tracking drawings, can officers confirm that vehicles travelling along Reading Road towards Wokingham will not be able to turn right across the flow of oncoming traffic to access the site? Because I would imagine that there will be a temptation for some people to do that, and that it could potentially be really rather dangerous. Thank you.
So some for Graham, some for Julia.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think Julie's provided quite a comprehensive answer in terms of the car parking. I would add that this is Wokingham town. This train station is very close by. There are bus stops nearby. It is our major transport hub in the borough. So I don't think it's unreasonable to say that people could visit the site via something other than the car. In terms of the typical age of people living in similar properties, I don't have the exact figures to hand. I know through discussions with the agent that realistically the age of people will probably be 75 and above. I don't know if the committee would like to ask the agent directly. I'll leave that to the chairman to decide. But certainly I would say that the restriction on age provided through the condition is really quite a low estimate, and in actual reality who is in there is much older than that. You've questioned the impact on affordable housing and SIL. In terms of the SIL payments, yes, it is a reduced amount compared to whether or not if it was considered just pure C3 use housing. This is an accepted part of SIL payments. That is a part of our adopted SIL payment infrastructure. So I don't think that we can say that that is unacceptable. In terms of affordable housing, this is not impacted specifically by the fact that it's retirement living in itself. The reason the affordable housing contribution is lower than the policy compliant level is due to the viability of the scheme itself, which takes into account quite a few things, particularly in terms of the construction of the development. So again, whilst yes, it is lower, the viability is a material consideration and something that we've weighed in the planning balance, and the benefits of the scheme far outweigh the minor negative impacts in terms of the reduced affordable housing element. The tracking element, I will defer to Judy on that one.
So yeah, on behalf of the tracking, the idea is it would be a left turn in only, and if you look at the site access plans, you can see that the access is kind of shaped to permit the sort of left turn into the site, but the curbing will actually prevent a right turn manoeuvre out, because it was picked up in the safety audit that it wasn't such a good idea to have right turning vehicles coming into the site crossing 3 lanes of traffic on Reading Road. So the design of the access has taken that on board, and that will be reinforced by signage and lining and so on the site. And that will obviously need to go through a full highways approval process, supervision of the works as they're done and signed off. Just to pick up on the typical parking requirements for a retirement site, so it would be something like 15 parking spaces for the residents and 3 parking spaces for visitors for this site. So and that's obviously based on things like car ownership reducing as people get older. I think for the sort of 75 age group, there's about 70% of them that own a car, and when you get to the 80 age group, it's more like 59% of them own a car. So as people get older, they tend to give up their driving licenses or stop driving. So I think, based on the independent research and retirement living properties, the site should probably need about 18 parking spaces to function. It's providing 32, so that's pretty decent. It is 6 below the market housing requirement, but as I've said before, it's not market housing and there is an age restriction. So we're fairly comfortable with this.
Perhaps I could ask Mr. Han, what is the average age of these other McCarthy and Stones? What would you anticipate for this one? Were we to approve?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The average age is in the mid-70s and are generally single-person households.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Gary Cowan now because he hasn't spoken yet. And he's somewhere out there in the ether. Gary?
Yeah, I'm still hiding out here. Thank you, Chairman. Bill Song picked up on my point on this and if those of us who are long in the tooth will remember, we gave permission to a very similar development behind the Rose and Crown and behind the old school there on the Reading Road, just opposite Chute End. It was for a lot less units than this, and there was very restricted car parking because there was the same argument there, the age of the people, they wouldn't have cars, etc., etc. What actually happened was that they couldn't get the occupants to occupy the apartments, and the problem they had was that they couldn't increase the car parking spaces to enable it to accommodate 1.5 parking spaces per development. So in a way, it is a worry for me if you're going to build 32 units, and I do welcome the scheme, I might add, and you have less car parking than what I would deem to be the norm for 32 commercial units. It would be a big worry for me. But I'm happy to listen to comments from the highways people, but it certainly caused a major problem on a scheme that this council had already approved on Reading Road, actually pretty close to this one. Thank you.
Is that something, Judy, we take into account where maybe things hadn't worked out in other schemes as well as we had anticipated?
I'm not familiar with that particular site, but like I say, in the transport statement for this application, there's been a lot of evidence submitted in terms of car ownership and parking for similar retirement properties. So that does hold quite a bit of weight. And as I said, there are other sites such as the residential application to the south of Carnival Pool, where I think there was about 5 units on that site without any dedicated car parking for those units. So, you know, the precedent has been set for a certain level of, you know, car-free development in the, you know, and close to the town centre, where things are within a walking distance and the site is accessed well by public transport and so on. So, you know, I think that, like I say, the precedent has been set elsewhere. It would be very difficult to, you know, kind of go against that.
Well, we're talking very differently when we talk about 75-year-olds, which is supposed to be the norm going into a development like this. They can walk around down to the station, into the middle of the town, etc., etc. It's slightly different. And as I said, my worry would be that we would grant planning permission for this, and then if the developer cannot sell all the units, he'll want to change the conditions, and he won't be able to fulfil the requirement because we've given way on the car parking. Having said that, I think the development is good, but I would like to see an opportunity to provide additional car parking spaces, or to make it very clear that the conditions for the development will be as listed, and that we wouldn't expect the developer to come back at a later date and say, let's open up all the units to all and sundry, because we're not getting the occupancy of these older people. Thank you.
Chairman, if I could just come back on that. Obviously, we can't prevent somebody from applying for planning permission, but if the applicant wanted to change that condition restricting the age occupancy, they would need to apply for permission. And at that point, obviously, we would assess the impact, but it could also be considered at this committee. So I think, you know, in that respect, there's no issue with that condition. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Stephen.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I remember the case that Gary was mentioning very well. We gave approval for over 55 housing with a certain number of car parking spaces allocated, reduced on the market rate, so to speak. And then, unfortunately, the developer was not able to fill all of the units with over 55-year-olds, and they applied for a relaxation of that condition to allow them to open it up to any residents. But clearly there was no scope within the arrangement to increase the amount of car parking accordingly. And we do need to be mindful of that unfortunate occurrence in the past. I'm hoping that will not happen here, but it would be nice if we could find room within the scheme to ensure there was enough space to add additional parking spaces if that were subsequently to be required. I just really want to now move on, if I may, to some other aspects of the application. I have to say, I'm attracted by certain features of this application. I think in design terms, it actually looks actually quite effective. I do have some concerns, however, that in this particular location, its scale and massing is a bit of a problem. I know that's acknowledged in the report, and I know that various efforts have been made to break up the bulk of the building and produce interesting roof angles and so forth. I suppose my concerns about scale and massing have not been entirely removed, and they're made worse, I think, by my anxieties about how this is all going to impact the setting of the listed building. I know this is a balancing act, and I know the planning officer's judgment is that this is minor harm, but obviously, listed buildings are a community asset. They're part of our built heritage, and we do things to imperil their setting and accessibility and visibility to future generations, I think, at our peril. So I would like some assurances on that. I did have a look at the relationship of the flank of the new proposed dwelling to the church. It's obviously a reasonable distance away, but I couldn't see very clearly whether there was going to be any landscaping along that boundary that would actually perhaps break up views of the new block from the church and soften its impact. Obviously, part of the problem is people who actually acquire those flats overlooking the church will have a very nice view. There'd be a good reason to be there. But I'm thinking also about the view from the church towards the flats, which is obviously the one that's going to be much more publicly accessible.
Graham, could you comment on those points?
Yeah, to be fair, you have kind of summed up the report quite well in that sense. Yes, the building is of a large scale, and that's coming about because it's a single footprint, and that's because they want to provide step-free access to all the apartments. It was something that we discussed in detail at pre-app stage and indeed kind of through to the application. So we have gone through quite a bit on it. You're right in saying that, yes, as officers, we do consider that what's been shown to you tonight is acceptable. They have done enough to kind of break up the built form, to kind of give it architectural interest. So my assurance to you really is that, from an officer perspective, we are happy with the design of the scheme. Yes, there is an element of impacting the setting of the listed building. I think to a certain extent, any development nearby would impact that setting. That is unfortunately unavoidable. I would point out that the conservation officer is not actually objecting to the scheme, but they just have highlighted that there is some harm. As I've said in the presentation, I think in the report, that it's considered less than substantial harm, and that's quite key. The NPPF does state that we must consider the level of harm and the significance of a historic asset. It's a grade 2 listed building. There is no loss of historic fabric occurring. There is a minor harm to the setting of the listed building in the sense of you are losing some of the kind of the spaciousness around that church. The NPPF states that less than substantial harm is potentially something that you may not be able to kind of take forward, I guess, to the extent of saying that it's a reason for refusal. I would find that, I think, quite difficult to substantiate, if I'm honest. I think that hopefully assures you, but if you want me to come back on it, I can.
I wasn't certainly going to propose a refusal, don't worry. But I was hoping that we might be able to provide some kind of landscaping on the boundary between the new dwelling or set of dwellings and the church that might soften its impact. Is that possible?
Yes, let me just check a condition. So condition 16, it's on page 94, basically says, notwithstanding the details that have been submitted, we would like to see the proposed landscaping and tree planting adjacent to the boundary to the churchyard to be approved in writing by us. So essentially, we are looking to provide boundary treatment and trees along that boundary through that condition and through the landscaping scheme. So I would hope that would be sufficient to alleviate any concern.
Thanks.
Okay, Angus, and then I think we need to move along.
Thank you, Chairman. Very quick one. I've just, as an observation, I've just done a bit of research, and this committee in November 2014 approved a McCarthy and Stone application just the other side of the station in Wellington Road. It was for 32 apartments, and we approved in that 27 car parking spaces, and I don't believe there's been a problem.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else wishing to speak. Yes, card is waving.
Thank you. Good spotting. I just want to make a quick point about the viability, which I'm unhappy that's being used again, but it is national policy, something we can't avoid. But I just want to pay tribute because I think a lot of work was put in to achieve quite a good result on that from the officers. And thanks for providing the report as well. That was useful to see. And I also want to commend the report for the photo montages, which probably a few too many, but they were very good at visualising what was going on, and I think we should force applicants to do that on every application, especially the next one, although it's probably a bit late. Yeah, so thanks.
Thank you. So it made the agenda rather larger than it was in text terms, but very welcome. Thanks to the applicant and officers for that. So I think we can move to the vote now. I don't see anyone's proposing a refusal, so go to the recommendation on page 90. There is clarification to condition 16. Sorry, can you just explain that, Graham?
Sorry, which are you looking at the supplementary planning agenda?
Yes.
So that's not a change to the condition. It was just explaining the reason for it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, those in favour of approving this application, please show. Any against? No, so that is approved. Thank you very much. And we move on to many pages later to Frog Hall on page 171. I think that's the next one. Yep. And the, where are we? Case Officer Adriana Gonzalez. Adriana, good evening.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. This is planning application 203460 for direction of fencing and hard standing to form a bin store to serve the existing block of flats at Frog Hall. The application is retrospective as the development was completed early 2020 as stated within the application form. The site is located in Wokingham Settlement within the grounds of Frog Hall, a converted block of flats. The surrounding area is characterized by mainly two-story residential dwellings on individual plots. The bin store, this is the location plan. The bin store, as highlighted in blue on the slide, is located within part of the private residential amenity of the block of flats towards the front northeastern corner of the site. It has direct access from the private right-of-way, which is a single carriageway, providing access to the block of flats and properties 40 to 46 Frog Hall Drive towards the eastern side. The previous location of the bin store highlighted in yellow on the slide was not suitable for storage and disposal of domestic waste for all the flats, being too small and far away from the council's collection point. This is the location of the bin store in relation to the block of flats and adjoining properties. It is suitably located for easy access for the residents and for collection, and adequately screened from public views with suitable landscaping so that it does not result in any harm to visual amenity or local character. These are views of the bin store when entering, yes, these are views of the bin store when entering and exiting the right-of-way. It is noted that the fencing and posts are all contained within the private rear residential garden of the block of flats without encroaching onto the carriageway nor reducing its width. The location of the bin store does not restrict access of service, delivery, or emergency vehicles to properties located within the right-of-way, and it does not represent a material difference to the previous situation where trees and hedges were right up to the edge of the carriageway. There have been no objections from the Council Highway Officer nor from the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Services on highway safety grounds. The recommendation is that the retrospective proposal makes adequate provision for the storage and collection of domestic waste and recyclable materials, having regard to neighbouring amenity and the character and appearance of the surrounding area. The proposal does not represent a material difference to the existing situation in terms of highway access and safety, and it is therefore considered that the development accords with national and local planning policies, and so it is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. And we have 3 speakers. First of all, David Rowland, who's a neighbour, and I believe Mr. Rowland's got some slides to show. So, Mr. Rowland.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I hope I can display the slides. Right. And can you see the slides or? Hello?
Quite small.
Right. Okay. Right, is that better? Okay. Right. First of all, I'll start off by saying I'm speaking for all those in the who object to this retrospective planning permission, and I repeat that it is retrospective planning permission. Sorry. There are 2 basic objections to the bin area. One is the restrictions to access to the neighbours, the Frog Hall flats, has been reduced over decades, and this bin area does finally block the access to any larger vehicles, and it causes problems to delivery vehicles getting around there. This disregard of the neighbours by the residents of Frog Hall does not really affect the planning permission, but it does reflect the way they should consider the concerns of the neighbours before they actually build a solid waste storage area. The second point is that the recommendations are that solid waste storage area should have proper drainage and washdown facilities. This area does not. It's also recommended the area should be in the shade. The previous area next to the hall was in the shade, and it caused problems with smell. The new area is in the full sun all day, but according to the residents, does not cause any problem with smell. The previous position had a negative effect on the sale of the flats, and I think it is some of the owners of the flats who had pushed to have this new bin area built. As much as anything else. One has a flat whose value has gone down from 325,000. It's now on the market for 285,000. The bin area obviously is an eyesore, but it's not an eyesore for the residents of the flats. The residents of the flats, in association with a professional property management company, decided no planning permission was or consultation with the neighbours was required. And they went ahead and built the solid waste area where it was cheapest for them and most convenient for them, regardless of anybody else, regardless of any regulations. And speaking to them, they basically made it clear that they've solved their problem without any regard for the planning laws and for anybody else. What's more, there is a suitable area on the other side of the car park. This area, this area is here marked in green and is over the other side of the car park. It's in the shade, it's close to the drains, it's easier for access for rubbish collection, and it's where planning permission has previously been granted for the construction of garages. This might have been more costly and complicated for the flats to arrange, but it would have resolved everybody's problems without transferring their problems to the neighbours. They've all through this process, they've showed complete disregard for the planning regulations, for the planning procedure. They took a long time to organise the retrospective planning permission.
Could you come to a conclusion, please?
Okay, and well, anyway, had prior planning permission been sought and required, I understand it would not have been allowed, and it will be wrong if this is allowed now simply because it has already been built. so I trust that you will reject this retrospective application. Thank you.
I move on to Carol Allen, who is a resident. Hope she's there.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Sorry about that. I'd just like to say that the first premise of we could have put it on the other land that he showed in green, we don't own that land. It doesn't belong to Frog Hall, it doesn't belong to any of us. As far as not having any regard for the laws, as soon as we realised that we needed planning permission, we applied for it. We didn't realise we needed planning permission. We thought we could do it through permitted development. That was our mistake. But we applied for retrospective as soon as possible. Our management company did ask the council if they had any objections, which they said they didn't, but we still didn't realise we needed planning permission, and for that we do apologise. All of the other issues that have been raised in the objections have been addressed by the planning officer, so I don't feel the need to go over those again. The reason I asked to speak was my concerns about why the bin store was listed, which were the access for fire safety and impeding the drive. The planning officer has again addressed the issue of impeding the drive, and we don't. And the fire brigade have sent in a report saying they have access, in which case I feel that we've answered everything and we're happy with the result that is given tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, Councillor Maria G, who listed the application, member for Westcott. She can't be here this evening, so I said that I'm very happy for Rochelle to read her statement out. Would you like to do that, Rochelle?
This is from Maria G. This approval of this planning application rests on the arguments about access and safety for residents at the lower end of Frog Hall Drive. I would like to draw the committee's attention to the arguments presented by the residents objecting to the application about restricted access to their homes and the accessibility for emergency vehicles. I ask that the committee satisfy itself that access is not impeded, particularly from a fire safety perspective.
Finished. Okay, thank you. I don't know whether you want to comment at this stage. If you comment, Adrian, on the you've already covered it, whether the access is impacted by these bins.
No, it is not impacted. It hasn't changed in respect to the previous situation, and we have received confirmation from the Royal Berkshire Fire and Safety Services that they don't have any objections, and they do have access towards the carriageway, towards the properties at the end of the carriageway.
Okay, thanks so much. Angus, I think you'd like to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. I believe we have to consider what's in the application here, which is okay, counter to what the first objector said. I've been on site. I see no objection, and I think we should move straight to the vote.
Anyone else wish to speak? Hello there, Rochelle, I think.
I'm just curious for the officer, where would you have preferred that he put the bin store? Would it be at the location that the first objector said, or where they put it presently?
Yeah, that's not relevant. We have to
consider. Just curious, that's all.
Well, you know, time is marching on. Carl.
Yeah, I just want to get clarity on that point. It says in the supplementary planning agenda, consultation response received from Royal Berks Fire and Rescue, advising the fire authority have no issues. I want to make sure that was something where they literally said, we have no issues and we have access and we are happy with that. And it wasn't just, we have no comment to make or no objection.
Oh, you see the supplementary planning
agenda? Yes, the message that's been submitted within the supplementary planning agenda is literally word by word what the response from the fire rescue services, that response we received word by word.
Okay, Carl. Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. I just really wanted to get some clarity on a point raised by one of the ward councillors, Peter Dennis. He's asking about why, well, I think he's suggesting that our own waste and recycling guidelines require a gate or a door on this compound. And I mean, he's suggesting that it's not possible because of it opening onto the shared driveway, and it would be blocked if there was a gate. I'm assuming it would not be, the gate wouldn't be open all the time. There's no point having a gate if it's open all the time. So would this be a significant problem to actually require a gate to be put on the compound? That might reduce the visibility, and it might even help with some of the issues to do with smell.
So I could comment, Adrian? Yes,
I think the main consideration is that we need to assess the application based on the information that has been submitted, the proposal that, not the proposal, the development that has been implemented on site, which doesn't have an access door. Again, the waste guidelines is a guideline. It provides that it should have a door, but in this case, it doesn't. Bear in mind that putting a door would create further issues in terms of highway safety and accessibility of the fire rescue access towards the properties at the end of the carriageway. But then again, that doesn't form part of this application, the proposal currently submitted for consideration.
Stephen?
Okay, I think I get the picture.
Actually, is there any evidence of bad smells?
There was not at the time of my site visit, but then again, I haven't been on site every single day, but I can't comment on the fact that all the bins at the time of the site visit, they all had lids, and it appeared well maintained and well kept. So.
Thank you. Bill, and then I think we can go to the vote.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just one point of clarification. Mr. Rowland said, I think Mr. Rowland, the objector, said that bin stores should have a washdown area and drainage. Is this something that should have been considered and perhaps should have been picked up by environmental health, or is it not a requirement?
There is a pipe for the washing of the bin store, which has been installed towards the rear of the fencing. The photos from the presentation does not show it, but it was present at the time of the site visit.
But is there a drain?
I cannot comment on whether it was a drain, to be honest. But yeah, I don't have that information, I'm afraid.
Would that normally be a requirement?
I assume, yes.
So does that now come under building control or something, that perhaps a drain should be installed, or is something that should be looked at by environmental health?
Justin, do you want to comment on that?
Thanks. Bill, there's no planning requirement for them to have a drain. Really, what we're considering is an application for some hard standing and a fence. The storage of the bins themselves within the site doesn't require permission. So all that's being applied for, I know it's termed a bin store, but it's the hard standing and the fencing. And really, that's what you've got to come to a view on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Bill. Andrew, quickly, please.
Sorry, my question's just been answered by Justin, so thank you.
Right. Great. Okay. I think we can go to the vote then. I don't see anyone who wishes to. Oh, sorry. Mr. Rowland, you did have your hand up. I don't want to debate it with you here because that's for the members, but did you have a point?
I just want to repeat. One of the reasons it was moved was because it smelled by the flats in the shade. Now it's in full sun and it smells, and I have to close my windows at times.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you for that clarification. So we go to the recommendation, which I can't find. Oh, it's on the first page, on page 171. Can I see those in favour of approving this application, please? Yeah. Any against? Any abstentions? 2 abstentions. How many is that? 4.
But it's still none against, so it's still.
Yeah, so that is carried. Thank you very much. Move on to the Dolphin School. On page 189. And it's you again, Adriana.
Thank you, Chair. This is planning application 210805 for Dolphin School for the proposed erection of a 2-story building to create additional classrooms, toilets, and library facilities with associated roof terrace. The proposal site is within the grounds of Dolphin Private School to the southwest of Waltham Road in Hurst, and it is part of the countryside, full part of the countryside. The eastern boundary of the site adjoins the curtilage grounds of the Hinton House, which is a Grade 2 listed building. The site comprises approximately 1.8 hectares, and that's the reason why it's been classed as a major application. This is the location of the proposed building. It would have an internal floor space of approximately 268 square meters, split into 2 levels. The proposed form and scale would be commensurate to the existing buildings on site. These are the proposed floor plans showing 2 classroom, music room, and toilets at ground floor, and library and art room facilities at first floor. An external staircase will provide access to the first floor and to the roof terrace. These are the proposed elevations. The new building represents a modern design, but its proportions would match the form, scale, and shape of other buildings within the school. This is a visual representation of how the building would look like within the context of the site. These are views from Waltham Road. The proposed development would not be seen from the public street scene, given its scale and significant setback from the road. This is a proposed location of the building. The proposed location of the building and scale would not detract from the views of or the setting of the Hinton House towards the left side of the slide. There would be approximately 50 meter separation distance between the proposed building and the heritage asset, and 2 layers of mature trees in between, which will not be affected by the proposal. These are other views showing the proposed location of the building. Existing trees on site are proposed to be retained, and this will be secured by condition. There is no increase in number of staff members nor pupils, so parking provision on site remains acceptable. To conclude, the proposal would provide a building of adequate scale and design to accommodate a much needed new educational unit within Dolphin School. There would be no detrimental impact upon the street scene or significance of the adjoining heritage asset, nor upon the character of the surrounding countryside, and subject to conditions, the application is considered to accord with national and local planning policies, and it is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. Speakers, there's no representations or objections on this, but I think Stephen, you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. All I wanted to say on this was obviously there is the issue of the setting of the listed building and the historic wall along Waltham Road, which I happen to pass on the way here this evening. But I accept entirely Adriana's point that there is really very effective screening between Hinton House and the new building. And although the new building is in a very contemporary design, I don't think that is in the least bit problematic in this particular setting. And it's very good to see the school is going to acquire this additional facility, and it looks very impressive. My only regret, and it's nothing to do with the planning application, is that that facility is not going to be more widely available to the community at large. But as a planning application, I think this is one we can approve.
Thank you, Stephen. Rochelle.
I do not see anything for sprinklers in this. And in case you weren't aware, yes, you weren't aware, the council has produced 3 different things that all new school buildings should have sprinklers. And this would meet the rules that the council has done. So this is part of planning policy and part of policy. So I would like to know why it isn't, or can we have an informative there? Please encourage them to follow the local rules and to put sprinklers in to make it safer for their students.
It has been included as an informative.
So it is an informative?
Yeah.
Yeah, can I refer Rochelle to informative number 4?
And it is building regulation, so it can't be conditioned, I believe. Okay. Don't see anyone else. Let's go check Gary. Nope. Okay, I'll go straight to the vote then. Page. Oh, sorry. There are the conditions have all been rewritten. I don't know if you can explain why that is, Adriana.
It's because we have received additional information from the applicant in order to not have too many pre-commencement conditions. That's why. That's the only change.
Okay, we'll go to the recommendation with those new conditions then on page 189. I see those in favour of approving this application, please. Any against? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And we move on to 57 Chiltern Crescent in Early, and the case officer is Benjamin Hindle. Good evening, Benjamin.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I'll just share my screen if that is all right. Excellent. Can we see that all right?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Wonderful. So this is application 210448, so 57 Chiltern Crescent in Early. And this is the household application for the proposed conversion of the loft space to a habitable room, and this will be facilitated by a rear dormer extension and a hip to gable conversion with changes to fenestration. So I've outlined 2 plans here. So there's a site plan and a location plan. So to the left, the site is outlined in red. It's located in the major development location of Early in the Bullmersh and Whitegate ward, midway down Chiltern Crescent. And for the purpose of latter analysis, I've actually highlighted London Road and Delamere Road, as well as annotated Bridges Grove, due to the wealth of examples and just to show those visually how close they really are. The application site itself is an asymmetric semi-detached dwelling, and this adjoins to number 55, and neighbours, however, does not adjoin to number 59. Now, the reason we can class this as an asymmetric semi-detached dwelling is under application number 32250, a 2-storey side extension with a hip end, which is to be retained, to be noted. And a single-storey front extension was approved. Now, this naturally unbalanced number 55 and number 57, which does sound far more detrimental than it is, because this is just one of the wide example of unbalanced semis along Chiltern Crescent. There's over 30 examples of mismatched dwellings in some way, and that's 30 examples of pairs, not individual dwellings. As the plans themselves, the only parts actually visible from Chiltern Crescent would be the hip to gable conversion to the front and 2 roof lights, to which there is precedent for both set along Chiltern Crescent, as well as a very relative minor scale. Further, the proposed dormer is in accordance with the guidance within the Borough Design Guide, figure 4.37. On page 57 clarifies this, as in it's set down from the main ridge, set in from the sides and set up from the eave. And due to location at the rear and minor screening from the existing hip end side extension, this will only be obliquely visible from the street scene and definitely not detrimental to the character of the area. This little screen snap here of the street scene is testament to how varied it really is. In this one image, we can see the precedent set for loft conversions, large alterations, unbalancing dwellings, and we can even see a gable roof up to the top. Now, the gable roof that I've just shown you there is number 88 Chiltern Crescent. And this is actually located just 60 metres from the site, so very local indeed. This was constructed under permitted development And though objection was received stating that this has not undergone the rigorous planning process as such, this still does form the new character of the area, and regardless of its origins, it does have an impact on what we see on Chiltern Crescent today. There is a wealth of examples which I can fly through now. Number 25 Delamere Road, that's 180 metres away from the site and adjoining, so this really forms a strong precedent from the street scene, as we can see, and this is not screened by any development, and it's not set down from the ridge height, to which the proposed is thought to be less impactful. Even more local, just 20 doors up to number 77 Chiltern Crescent, we can see here, between 2015 and 2019, the gable conversion has occurred from the original hit, and this is a prominent corner location as well. So this site is actually visible from not only Chiltern Crescent, but London Road and Delamere Road also. So that is a far more prominent location to establish Chiltern Crescent's new character of a large variety of roof forms. Finally, there was objection received on the actual bulk and scale of the proposed, and number 4 is it's far larger than the proposed, and it's one example of many along Chiltern Crescent of these large bulky extensions that have been approved, and it has added to that precedent. And this final example here, number 17 Delamere Road, this is very similar to the proposed. However, this is not screened by a side extension, and just again shows that gable end character just 160 meters away from the application site. For completion, here are the floor plans, and this is really indicative of how minimal the application really is. It's the addition of 1 habitable room and 1 shower room. This features a Juliet balcony and window to the rear. This is located 55 meters away from the nearest neighbor to the rear and has the same arc of outlook as your standard window, located just 1 meter above the existing window on the first floor. In line with the 1 new habitable room proposed, the existing parking provision of 3 spaces is considered more than adequate. I can condition this on page 216 to ensure that this is retained at all times, and this is in line with our adopted parking standards. Further, it's to be noted that this is as existing, and as it's hard landscaped already, there will be no reduction in green softening whatsoever, so no impacts or further impacts to the character of the area. The proposed development would not lead to a harmful impact upon the character of the area or the amenity of neighbouring occupiers, nor would it result in a detriment to highway safety and parking provision. And it is therefore recommended that the Planning Committee authorises the head of development to grant planning permission subject to the conditions set out in the report. These are on pages 216 and 217. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Andrew, I think you declared an interest in this application. Is it prejudicial? I think according to the rules, I'm advised you have to leave the room, I'm afraid, for the item. Thank you. We have 2 speakers. Now, first of all, Mr. Tim Marsh, please.
Good evening. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that these huge dormers are popping up everywhere, and I'm sure that all the members of the committee have seen them. They're loved by absentee landlords, but disliked by residents who actually have to live in the area because they're ugly, they distort the roof profile, and they cause overlooking at the rear of the property, because they effectively add a 3rd story as far as the neighbours in their back gardens are concerned. I'll come back to that later. Up to now, all such dormers in white gates have been refused if they've come before planning, because, and I quote, they do not relate to the design of existing building in terms of roof form, materials and position. Those that do exist, as the planning officer has pointed out, have bypassed planning, and they've been done under permitted development. Now, the planning officer has pointed out that number 88 has hip end, and as he says, there's no planning permission required for it. So there's still a clear character for semi-detached. If you looked on the back on the pictures that he showed, still a clear character for semi-detached, hip end, sloping end properties in the area, which the residents like, and that forms part of it. Now let's go back to this overlooking. Now I will attempt to put a picture up in front of you. Let's see if can you see that picture there? If there's a picture, should be a picture on the screen. No. You can't see it? I shall abandon that one then. I apologise for that. if there is overlooking at the back, once you put a third story up with windows there, you get a field of regard from the rooms, from the windows, is much greater than if the dormer was set further back up the roof, as traditional smaller dormers were. Therefore, if you were further back up the roof, you could only overlook a reasonable amount of the garden. But if you bring the viewpoint forward, you're looking straight down into the neighbouring property. Now, the planning officer has referred to neighbouring amenity on page 21. He has said that this will be no detrimental overlooking impact to neighbours, but is concerned about the back-to-back separation of 30 metres. Now, back-to-back separation is quite long in these roads, but what I'm concerned, or what we're concerned about, is looking down on your neighbours from a third floor that you suddenly appear. So there we are. That's why we don't like them. They look horrible and they don't. Now, the strategic policy of CP3 states that development should be appropriate to the area in which it's located without detriment to the amenities of adjoining land users and occupiers. Now, the general principles of the Borough Design Guide on page 11 refer to CP3 and state that development has to be responding appropriately to existing character and identity of area and relating well to neighbours. Now, if you've got something which isn't in character and you're being overlooked by it, it looks horrible, that does not comply with the current policies.
Could you come to
that has been refused. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much indeed. Now we've got Councillor Shirley Boyd, local member, Borough Councillor.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to slightly reiterate some of the things that Tim has said, but have a couple of other points. Chiltern Crescent, like most roads in Whitegates, consists of semi-detached houses with hipped roofs. This style of roof presents a pleasing rhythm to the street scene. And according to the Borough Design Guide, we should maintain a vernacular style of roof when building extensions to maintain this kind of rhythm. And in fact, if you walk along Chiltern Crescent, you will see that most residents have done exactly that. And there are, in fact, only 2 side extensions with gable ends, which the planning officer has showed us, that are actually in that road. And neither one does anything to enhance the street scene. So to use these as a precedent for allowing this application, in my view, is a case of the tail wagging the dog. Planning officers in this committee should be looking at exemplary extensions, of which there are many, to set a precedent. What is the point of the Borough Design Guide if we do not follow our own guidelines? A small change to the roof design to include a partial hip joint, which incidentally is what they have done on number 4, which was cited as an example of a large extension. That hasn't got a full gable end. It actually has a small partial hip joint, which does actually make a difference. So a small change to the roof design to include a partial hip joint would not impinge on the floor area of the loft conversion and would only involve a small reduction in the size of the dormer, which, given its size and the fact that it is not subservient to the main dwelling, would be no bad thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Members. Do I see no? Somebody. Yes, Carl. Sorry, I beg your pardon, Carl. You're the local member, so do go first. Anyway.
Yes, I'm a local member. I know this road very well indeed. I've got a couple of questions really first. One is when we refer to an extension or a dormer being subservient, do we have any measurement limits on that? Of course, this is stated to be 20 centimetres from the ridgeline, or actually 0.2 metre it says, but 20 centimetres. That doesn't seem very subservient to me, but I just want to know whether we've actually got a limit on that, or whether the rules are it literally could be a couple of millimetres and that would count as subservient. And the other thing I want to discuss is on page 221, paragraph 19 refers to permitted development, and I think it was mentioned by the officer in this report here. There's at least one which he pointed out had been done, a similar kind of change had been done under permitted development. So how much of this development could have been done under permitted development? So why is it before us, I guess, is the question I'm asking there. I've got other things to say, but we'll see those first.
Okay, can we get your response to those 2 points of Carl's?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so the permitted development point, I'll touch on that one first. The answer is yes. The actual gross volume would be in keeping. It's set in from the ends and it's set down from the main ridge and up from the eave. It actually does follow the rough advice within R23 of the Borough Design Guide. If we refer to on page 57, figure 4.37, this does advise that dormers, even hip to gable dormers, are acceptable if they are designed to become an integral part of the dwelling, to which this proposed does. This could have been permitted development if it was not for previously approved 32250, and it does rely on part of that roof structure to facilitate the gable end conversion, which is why it couldn't be done under permitted development. Sorry, no, please, sorry.
Have you finished?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, yeah, great. Thanks for that. So that's the reason it's had to be an application then, because of it's relying on a previous one. Okay. I just want to make the point that I think that kind of reiterate what Shirley said really. When you go to that street, yes, there are examples that are different, but overwhelmingly it's the hip ends, and lots of the houses in that area have got those hip ends. And I think, you know, the problem we've got here is when we have an application like this, which is, oh, look, there's one example of it. We end up in a situation where, you know, the street scene radically changes because we have a borough design guide, which is all about trying to create streets that have a particular character in particular areas. And then if we're going to allow one to change, then that's it. They can all change. And there's a frustration, I think. You know, here we've got the town council, which is why Andrew isn't here. The ward member and the residents association have all complained and objected about this, and several others previously. And I think it would be helpful to all of us if we could admit the design guide is now worthless, and that way a lot of us could, you know, not spend time and effort trying to get these things listed and get them looked at when it's never going to be stopped. I think I agree. This dormer is effectively a third floor, and I know under permitted development that's actually going to be allowed pretty much anyway, a proper third floor. But you know, it's a sorry state of affairs.
Justin, can you just clarify? Does the precedent, does that trump the borough design guide?
The design guide is simply that, it's a guide. So there will be circumstances where it's appropriate to permit more than the guide allows. Now, one such circumstance might be this, because if it wasn't for the side extension, the hip to gable enlargement and the rear dormer would be permitted development, i.e. it wouldn't require an application to us. The only reason that it's caught is because that side extension takes up the roof volume. So any of the other properties along that street that haven't had that first floor side extension could do exactly what's being proposed under this application, but without an application.
Okay, thanks. Stephen?
Thank you. I agree entirely with Carl. It's a very sad state of affairs because clearly what was a characteristic form of the area has gradually been eroded and is in danger of being lost. But I fear the villain of the piece here is not the Borough Design Guide, but the Town and Country Planning General Permitted Development England Order 2015 as amended, because that really, I'm afraid, has now made it very difficult to defend the character of the area because so much can be done under permitted development that erodes the character of the area and then makes it extremely difficult when an application comes in under the normal planning system to actually take a view that it doesn't comply with the character of the area, because the character of the area has been already damaged by permitted development under the 2015 order. So I feel enormous sympathy for the residents who are concerned about this. I feel enormous sympathy for the town council and the local members, but I honestly cannot see what we can do as a planning committee to help, because I think our hands are literally tied.
Well, I don't know about literally tied, but
not literally.
I wonder, would it be appropriate if we were to approve this to put an informative expressing our dismay that PD rights can have this effect?
Be delighted if we could do that, but I'm not entirely sure we can.
Justin, would that be a good move? No, shaking his head violently, I have to say. Okay. Does anyone else want to speak? If not, I'll go to the recommendation on page 216. So those in favour of approving the application, please show. Yeah, and against? Right, all except one. Thank you, so that is approved. Yes, please, yes, get Andrew back. So this is the former Microsoft site at Thames Valley Park. And the officer is Baldeep. Good evening, Baldeep. Can't hear you, I'm afraid. You're miming.
Sorry. Yeah, I'll just get the presentation ready. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So this is application 210378. It's for buildings 4 and 5 of Microsoft Campus. It's a full application for proposed alterations to the external areas to provide improved landscaping, outdoor gym, an outdoor amenity and presentation area, the erection of a new refuse store and reconfiguration of the car parking. This is currently the existing location plan. So building 4 and 5 are located on the southeastern part of the Microsoft campus. They're existing commercial buildings with external car parking and landscaping, and they're part of the wider Thames Valley Business Park. This is a proposed site layout, which indicates the variety of works that are proposed. It's noted that the scheme will improve the use of the external areas of the site and make better use of the underutilized parts of the site as well. The proposed new bin store, it will be 11 meters wide and 2.1 meters high. It will be an enclosed store and will be finished in timber cladding, which is acceptable use of materials in the commercial setting. So this would be the outdoor gym area. These visuals have been provided by the agent. It will be a hard landscaped area and it will be a flexible space for outdoor activity, workout classes, and there will also be new soft landscaping, which will be included around this area. This is a designated outdoor amenity and presentation area. Again, visuals have been provided. This area will provide outdoor seating and deliver an improved area for employees for outdoor presentation and gathering. This is the existing buildings on site. This is the front elevations of both building 4 and 5. As you can see, there is some car parking to the front. This is the existing car parking to the rear of the building, and the configuration of the car park will provide an additional 41 parking spaces on the site. These are the existing areas for the outdoor gym and the amenity area. So the first photo on the left is roughly the area where the new outdoor gym will go. And the photograph on the right, further down, is roughly where the area for the outdoor amenity and presentation area will be located. Subject to the conditions set out in the officer's report and the supplementary planning agenda, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No speakers and no objections. Anyone have any points they'd like to raise? Yeah, Carl.
Yeah, just to say that it's obviously an upgrade and hopefully they're going to bring more companies and more jobs to the park, so that's good. I was a bit disappointed with the number of charging points for electric vehicles that were specified. We're talking about our emerging standard, and then it said that there would be an extra 2 and the car park has 586 spaces. But I'm assuming that's a proportion of what's being added as opposed to, but yeah, obviously a place like this kind of, it needs a lot of those, but I mean, it'd be unreasonable to consider refusing it on that basis, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? Okay, go to the recommendation on page 229. There are conditions. Condition 4 is modified slightly. Everyone's happy with that. Those in favour of approving the application, please show. Those against? Everybody, I think. So that is approved. Thank you very much. That's the last application. There's nothing I've decided which is urgent. Do we want to go through the appeal decisions? Yep, I draw your attention to the appeal decisions. Oh, yes, of course. Yep, we have no preemptive site visits planned at the moment, and then we've got 3 pages. Are we still broadcasting? Yeah, but it's all up. Yeah. So we're still getting a very good record on appeals. All but one have dismissed. So well done to our officers. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on any of that. If not, I'll close the meeting. Stephen?
I just wanted to say essentially the same as you've done, Chris, that this is a very impressive record. We seem to be getting a lot more right than we're getting wrong. So that's tribute to the officers, I think, and we should thank them.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we'd all agree with that. If there's no further comments, then I'll declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much, everybody, either here or there.